All made in the USA. We are the envy of Russia. We are the envy of China. Nobody has the equipment, even the Hydrosonically. What we have is incredible. The F-35 fighter jet, the best in the world stealth. Tankers, new freighters. We have everything. $2.5 trillion all made in the USA. We are the envy of Russia. We are the envy of China. Nobody has the equipment, even the hypersonic missiles that Obama messed up on. We have hydrosonic missiles. They go 7 times faster than a normal missile. We have the best hydrosonic in the world.
We think he meant hypersonic.
I don't know. Hydrosonic. I mean, you see how white
toothbrush.
his teeth are. And so perhaps, Willie, maybe he was talking about the hydrosonic, because that technology, let me tell you something, my friends. The Chinese, Willie, I don't think they have hydrosonic toothbrushes like we have hydrosonic toothbrushes. Sure, they can try to steal the patent from hydrosonic, but there's only one hydrosonic toothbrush. And when you feel it in your hands, the quality, it shows on your teeth.
It's not cheap, as we just showed there, but by God, it's worth it. It gets in those hard-to-reach places. If you have plaque and tartar buildup, it'll attack that immediately. So I think he's right to tout our technology in the area of hydrosonic toothbrushes.
You know what?
USA, baby. That's what you call American exceptionalism.
It is. Oh, yeah.
He wants to listen to Dr. Fauci. He'll listen to the scientists. COVID, pandemic, COVID. He'll listen to the scientists. If I listened totally to the scientists, we would right now have a country that would be in a massive depression. Instead of, we're like a rocket ship. Take a look at the numbers. Before the plague came in, I had it made. I wasn't coming to Erie. I mean, I have to be honest. There's no way I was coming. I may never have to come back here again if I don't get I'll never be back. You understand that? If I lose to him, I don't know what I'm going to do. I will never speak to you again. You'll never see.
I need you to do 2 things. Number 1, don't panic. Say, don't panic. They're about to turn up the mess. We know that intimidation is on their ballot. We know that suppression is their only weapon. But we know who we are and whose we are, and we are Georgia, and we will win. We're going to call our friends. We're going to harass our neighbors. We're going to call people we owe money, people who owe us money, people we're mad at, people we broke up with. But we are calling every Georgia Democrat, and we're calling them to action.
Well, perhaps Senator Perdue would have been able to respond properly to the COVID-19 pandemic if you hadn't been fending off multiple federal investigations for insider trading. It's not just that you're a crook, Senator. It's that you're attacking the health of the people that you represent. You did say COVID-19 was no deadlier than the flu. You did say there would be no significant uptick in cases. All the while, you were looking after your own assets.
Now, we're counting on the federal court system to make it so that we can actually have an evening where we know who wins, okay?
Born and raised in New York City, from his father he learned the lessons of his success: lie, cheat, and steal. He inherited hundreds of millions and squandered it on failed businesses. 6 bankruptcies, settled $25 million for scamming students. Sued by thousands, including the Justice Department, for discriminating against black people in his housing. Accused by 26 women of sexual misconduct, including assault and rape. Donald Trump. As president, he pledged to take on American carnage. Instead, he caused it, stoking the fire of racism and division, losing a trade war with China, pushing millions off their health care, triggering an economic collapse by refusing to lead in a global pandemic, standing back and standing by as over 225,000 Americans died from COVID.
I don't take responsibility at all.
America can't afford 4 more years of Donald Trump.
I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
What if your doctor told you that the pain you had in your stomach was just a typical common cramp, and that it would go away in a few weeks? But what he knew and didn't tell you was it was actually cancer. Cancer that, if left untreated, would continue to spread Why would your doctor lie to you?
I wanted to always play it down. I still like playing it down.
We have it very much under control. It will go away. Just stay calm. And I think the numbers are going to get progressively better as we go along.
What benefit is there in not telling you the truth?
Because I don't want to create a panic.
This is America. We don't panic. We fight. President Trump doesn't think you're tough enough or smart enough to fight this disease. So he lied.
We're in great shape.
And the only cure for a lie is the truth.
The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
They've sacrificed for 9 months, none more than those doctors and nurses, and those healthcare workers. And this president is questioning their character, their integrity, their commitment to their fellow Americans. As I said, it's a disgrace. And last night, Trump said he was going to fire Dr. Fauci. Isn't that wonderful? I got a better idea. Elect me and I'm going to hire Dr. Fauci. And we're going to fire Donald Trump.
Don't tell anybody, but let me wait till a little bit after the election. I appreciate the advice. I appreciate it. No, he's been wrong on a lot. He's a nice man, though. He's been wrong on a lot.
2008 and 2012, you placed your trust in me and Barack. In 2020, I'm asking you to trust me again. I'm proud of the coalition this campaign has built to welcome Democrats, Republicans, and Independents. I'm running as a proud Democrat, but I'll govern as an American president. There will be no red states and blue states, just the United States. And I promise you, I'll work as hard for those who don't support me as those who do. We grew up, his dad and I grew up 5 blocks away from one another in Scranton. Bobby Casey, Patti LaBelle, and John Legend. My Lord, John, I'm voting for you after I heard that speech you made. Look, and the second future gentleman, Doug. Doug, God love you. You are a good man. And I want to thank the next Vice President of the United States, woman I am so proud to be running alongside of, Kamala Harris. Look, I know as a Scranton boy and then raised on the border of southern Pennsylvania and Claymont, Delaware, I know it's not always easy to bring western and eastern Pennsylvania together. But you know what? The Steelers got a big win yesterday and the Eagles got a big win last night. So we can both be happy. And folks, I have a feeling we're coming together for a big win tomorrow. My Lord, there's a lot of you out here in this cold night. Thank you. And by the way, in the parking garage, don't jump. I need you. Don't jump. Folks, look. 18 months ago, we kicked off the campaign at Teamsters Local 249 right here in Pittsburgh. I chose Western Pennsylvania for my first stop as a candidate, and now for my last stop before Election Day, because you represent the backbone of this country. Hard-working families. We're asking nothing but a fair shot, an even chance. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things. The qualities that built this country, that created and sustained the middle class. And by the way, as I said twice earlier today, unions built the middle class. Look, we've been through a lot in this country since we announced. America's facing a confluence of crises unlike anything in living memory. We're still in the battle for the soul of America. Decency, honor, respect. Where has it gone with this president? But let me tell you something, folks. Tomorrow's the beginning of a new day. Tomorrow, we can put an end to a presidency that has left hard-working Americans out in the cold. Tomorrow, we can put an end to a presidency that's divided this nation and fan the flames of hate. Tomorrow, we can put an end to a presidency that has failed to protect this nation. Ladies and gentlemen, millions of Americans have already voted, close to 100 million, and millions more will vote tomorrow. And my message to you is simple. The power to change this country is in your hands. In your hands. I don't care how hard Donald Trump tries. There's nothing that's going to stop the people of this nation from voting. Period. And when America votes, America will be heard. And America's heard. I believe the message will be loud and clear. It's time for Donald Trump to pack his bags and go home.
I'll let you motherfuckers think y'all run everything.
Now listen, I got to campaign with Joe over the weekend. It felt like the old days. And I can't wait to see him back in the White House because for 8 years he was the last person who left the room whenever I faced a big decision, and he made me a better president. He has the character and the experience to make us a better country. And he and Kamala are going to be in the fight, not for themselves, but for every single one of us. We can't say that about the president right now. You know, I never thought that Donald Trump would share my vision or embrace all of my policies, but I hoped, for the sake of the country, that he might take the job seriously, that he put in the work. But he hasn't. He hasn't shown any interest in taking seriously the work that is involved in being president, or helping anybody but his friends, or himself, or treating the presidency as anything more than a reality show that he can use to get himself attention. And the rest of us have to live with the consequences. And Grace talked about those consequences. 230,000 Americans dead. More than 100,000 small businesses closed. 500,000 jobs gone here in Florida. And his chief of staff, he's admitting what we knew all along. He was quoted just a few days ago. He says, we're not going to control the pandemic. That's a quote. We noticed. America just had its single worst week of new cases. And so what's Trump's closing argument? Last night, this is last night on his COVID spreader tour. I mean, he's a super spreader. He just goes around because nothing's more important to him than crowds to make him feel good, as opposed to trying to keep the American people safe. Last night he told his supporters, don't tell anybody, but I'm going to fire Dr. Fauci after the election. Don't boo. Vote. You know. And just in case you were worried he was taking COVID too seriously, now we find out his intention is to eliminate from his administration one of the world's leading experts in infectious disease. The one guy who's taken it seriously all along that he hasn't been paying attention to. He's been listening to the guy, apparently, who thinks injecting bleach might be a good idea, but not the actual expert on infectious disease. So they want to move out the scientists and the doctors who understand this disease and put in people or maintain folks who don't know what they're doing. Essentially, their closing argument when it comes to COVID is you ain't seen nothing yet. But this is the last chance. This is his last chance to explain why we should give him 4 more years. And what you hear him talking about is his inauguration crowd being smaller than mine. After 4 years, that's what he's still worrying about. Let it go. What is his obsession with crowd size? Does he have nothing better to worry about? Did no one come to his birthday party when he was a kid? Look, that's the difference between Joe and Donald Trump right there. That's the difference. Joe cares about you and your safety and your security.
Yes, he does.
Trump cares about feeding his ego. I understand the president wants to take full credit for the economy he inherited, but zero blame for the pandemic he ignored. But the job doesn't work that way. Tweeting at the TV doesn't fix things. Making stuff up doesn't make things better. You've got to have a plan. You've got to put in the work. And along with the experience to get things done, Joe Biden has concrete plans and policies to turn our vision of a better, fairer, stronger country into reality. He takes this pandemic seriously. He knows how much it hurts for grandparents and grandkids who can't see each other and hug each other. He's not going to screw up testing. He's not going to call scientists idiots or put people at risk or, as he did just a few days ago, accuse medical professionals like Grace of trying to profit from the pandemic after all they've been through. Ridiculous. Shameful. Come on. Joe will get this pandemic under control with a plan to make testing and a vaccine free for every American and make sure frontline heroes like Grace never have to ask other countries for the equipment they need. And his plan will guarantee paid sick leave for workers and parents affected by the pandemic and make sure that small businesses that hold our communities together and employ millions of Americans can reopen safely. You know, Donald Trump likes to claim he built this economy. America created 1.5 million more jobs in the last 3 years of the Obama-Biden administration than in the first 3 years of his. And that was before he could blame the pandemic. We handed him the longest streak of job growth in American history. The economic damage he inflicted by botching the pandemic response means he will be the only president since the Great Depression to actually lose jobs. He talks about black unemployment, says he's the best president for black folks since Abe Lincoln. Really? Don't boo. Vote. His son-in-law says, oh, black folks, they have to want to be successful. That's the problem. That's the problem? Really? Like 300 years of history is not the problem? Listen. When it came to the economy, black unemployment almost hit 17% during the Great Recession 10 years ago. Through hard work, Joe and I helped to get it down to 7.8% by the time we left office. And it kept on going down. Not because Trump did anything. This year it soared back up to 17% here in Florida. His buddies at Mar-a-Lago may be better off than they were 4 years ago with the massive tax cuts he gave them. But ordinary families here in Florida, they didn't see that. Now he won't extend relief to the millions of families who are having trouble paying the rent or having trouble making payments on their student loans or just putting food on the table because of this pandemic. And Joe Biden understands the key to a strong economy isn't more tax cuts for billionaires. It's lifting up the prospects of working Americans so that everybody has a chance to succeed. And that's what Joe's got, a plan to create 10 million good, clean energy jobs, to protect Florida from climate change, to secure environmental justice. And he'll pay for those plans by rolling back Trump's tax cuts for billionaires. And Joe doesn't just want to get back to where we were. He sees this as a chance to make long overdue changes in the economy so everybody's life is a little bit easier. Whether it's the waitress trying to raise her own kid on her own, or the student trying to figure out how to pay for next semester's classes, or the shift worker that's worried about getting laid off, or the cancer survivor who's worried about her pre-existing condition protections being taken away. Florida, I need to talk to you about health care for a second, because maybe what Grace said you guys didn't hear. I want to remind you of this. Republicans love to say right before an election that they'll protect your pre-existing conditions. You know what? Joe and I actually protected them 10 years ago with the Affordable Care Act. Hispanics saw bigger gains in coverage than anybody else. Almost 93% of Hispanic kids got covered, an all-time high. Under this administration, Hispanic kids have lost coverage. Republicans have tried to repeal or undermine the Affordable Care Act more than 60 times. Think about that. Why would you make that your mission? taking people's health care away. And with no plan. They promised. They said, don't worry, when we get rid of this plan, we'll give you a better plan. They've been promising that for 10 years now. Still don't have one. I keep on looking for it. I've looked for it everywhere. You know, between the cushions and the couch, you know, it's nowhere to be found. Instead, they've attacked the Affordable Care Act at every turn. They've driven up costs, they've driven up the uninsured. Now they're trying to get the Supreme Court to take your health care away in the middle of a pandemic, at a time when families need it most, with nothing but empty promises to take its place. And think about what that would do to families right here in South Florida. Miami-Dade has the highest enrollment under Obamacare of any county in Florida. Florida has the highest enrollment of any state in America. So when Trump last week flat out says he hopes Supreme Court overturns Obamacare, what he's saying is he wants to take your health insurance away. Just said it. Joe and Kamala will protect your health care. Joe and Kamala will expand Medicare. Joe and Kamala will make insurance more affordable than everybody, because Joe understands that a president's first job is to keep us safe from all threats, foreign, domestic, and microscopic. So when the daily intelligence briefings that a president gets every morning has a flashing warning light saying there's a virus coming, the president can't be AWOL. When Russia puts bounties on our soldiers' heads, the commander-in-chief can't be MIA. Joe Biden would never call our troops suckers or losers, because he understands that's somebody's kid, somebody's spouse, somebody's mom or dad. When a hurricane devastates Puerto Rico, a president is supposed to help rebuild, not toss paper towels, not suggest selling Puerto Rico, not withholding billions of dollars until just before an election. And here in South Florida, you see these ads. You know, Joe palling with communists, palling with social. You'd think he was having coffee with Castro every morning. Don't fall for that. He's been coddling dictators for the last 4 years. And now apparently he says he might declare victory before all the votes are counted tomorrow. Don't boo. No, that's not something you want to hear in Little Havana or Little Haiti. That's not something that a leader of a democracy does. That's something a two-bit dictator does. If you believe in democracy, you want every vote counted.
Wow, this is a big crowd. This is a very big crowd. Look at all those cameras over there. Can you show the crowd? You know? Can you show this crowd? They never talk about our crowd. And in reverse, they never talk about Sleepy Joe's crowd either. It's about 12 people just showed up, 12. Look at this crowd. Maybe you could take those cameras and just show over there and over there.
What is his obsession, by the way, with crowd size? You notice that? He's always worried. This is the one measure he has of success. He's still worrying about his inauguration crowd being smaller than mine. It really bugs him. He's still talking about that. Does he have nothing better to worry about? Did no one come to his birthday party when he was a kid? Was he traumatized? What's with crowds? Well, you know, I've had crowds before, you know. Had quite a few. But you know, when A country's going through a pandemic, that's not what you're supposed to be worrying about. I got a call and said, look, Georgia could be the state. Georgia could be the place where we put this country back on track, and not just because Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have a chance to win Georgia, but you've got the chance to flip 2 Senate seats. I said, well, I got to go. I got to come. I told Michelle, I'm sorry, baby. I got to go to Georgia.
He looked straight into the cameras at the American people and lied about it. He covered it up. Now, can you imagine what you would have done if you had known on January 28th what he knew? What you might have done, what your family might have done to prepare? Can you imagine how our businesses, how our schools might have been able to prepare? How we as a country might have been able to prepare? But Donald Trump doesn't think about what's best for America. He only thinks about what is best for himself. And as a result, we have lost 230,000 lives to COVID. So many people forced to die alone because of the nature of this virus. 230,000 Americans. The last time we experienced loss like this was World War II. In addition, we're looking at over 9 million people who have contracted the virus, and we know it's hitting communities of color the hardest. Latinos are contracting COVID at 3 times the rate of others. Black folks are dying at twice the rate of others. And let's be clear, we are also in the worst economic crisis we have faced since the Great Depression, because Donald Trump failed to contain this virus. He failed to lead. 23 million people are receiving unemployment. 1 in 5 mothers with a child under the age of 12 is describing her children as being hungry in America. In 1 in 6 households, folks are behind on their rent and concerned they may not be able to pay rent. 1 in 4 small businesses have closed. And yet, 9 months into this pandemic, this president still doesn't have a plan to contain it. We have witnessed the greatest failure of a presidential administration in America's history. And on top of it all, President Trump is in court right now trying to end the Affordable Care Act and take health coverage away from over 20 million Americans. He's trying to end protections for the over 100 million Americans with pre-existing conditions. Conditions like asthma, diabetes, high blood pressure, or cancer. Honk if you know somebody, raise your hand if you know somebody with diabetes or high blood pressure or asthma or breast cancer. Because this fight includes a fight for them. America, we cannot afford 4 more years of Donald Trump. And the first thing Joe and I will do when we are in the White House is get this virus under control. We will listen to the scientists and public health experts. We will provide free testing and treatment, and when it is available, a safe vaccine for all. We will provide schools with the guidance and resources they need to reopen safely, and we will build back an economy that actually works for working people. And let me be clear, Joe and I will not increase taxes on anyone making under $400,000 a year, period. But we will ask the super wealthy and biggest corporations to pay their fair share. And we'll invest those tax dollars to rebuild our nation's infrastructure, to tackle the climate crisis and create millions of good-paying union jobs, make childcare more affordable, and invest in our nation's schools and in our nation's teachers. We will build on Obamacare and expand access to health care to tens of millions of Americans, including expanding mental health care, because we understand the body doesn't just start from the neck down, it includes the neck up, and it deserves the health care that all people need.
A group of President Trump supporters surround a Joe Biden campaign bus. The Biden campaign says the trucks tried to run them off the road, and now the FBI is getting involved. Plus, what the legal battle to throw out more than 100,000 votes in Texas means for the state of the race.
You see the way our people, they were protecting his bus yesterday because they're nice. So his bus, they had hundreds of cars, Trump and the American flag. That's it. You see Trump and American flag. Do you ever notice when you see the other side? I don't even see much of the other side.
President Trump with that praise of a caravan of his supporters harassing a bus belonging to Joe Biden's campaign. Video of the incident from Friday showed Trump supporters surrounding the Biden campaign bus with their vehicles in Texas. The Biden campaign said the pro-Trump trucks tried to run the bus off the road as it traveled from San Antonio to Austin. Trump tweeted praise for the supporters involved.
Look at that. Look at that, knocking the cars out of the way.
And then, quote, in my opinion, these patriots did nothing wrong. Instead, the FBI and justice should be investigating the terrorists, anarchists, and
blah, blah. Just,
my Lord.
Willie, is this really where Republicans, because Donald Trump's going to be gone, is this really where Republicans want politics to be? Do they want their supporters to be chased off the road and by a Democrat 4 years from now? Do they want their candidate, Republican candidates, to be surrounded by angry mobs and have their bus pushed off the road? I mean, this is...
Everybody knows better.
Yeah, and of course, you would expect the president condemn this. You would expect every Republican condemn this. They won't. But the president not only refuses to condemn this behavior, he praises it.
Yeah, and that's always been the case for him as president, hasn't it been? Where there's an ugly incident, a despicable incident, as in this case, and you would expect the president of the United States to use his pulpit to condemn it. Instead, he fans the flames. He's done it again and again and again in every different area you can conceive of, calling these people patriots. The people on that Biden-Harris bus, Vice President Biden was not on the bus, but his staff and surrogates were there. They had to call 911. Ultimately, the police came in and gave them an escort. They had to cancel some events where they were headed. So this was a serious incident. The FBI doesn't get involved if it's not. And you would hope, you can't hope anymore with this president, but you would hope that a president would not call them patriots and then gleefully recount the story at his rallies as he did. It's an ugly moment, and we saw too much of it yesterday. Actually, there were Trump supporters blocking traffic on roadways around New York City, the tri-state area. MAGA hats, American flags flooded New Jersey's Garden State Parkway Sunday morning, backing up traffic for miles. Exact numbers.
Oh boy, that's a good way. Hey, yeah. Hey, Willie, that's a good way to win votes, isn't it? To be. You know what? I almost used a word on the air that I can't use here, but to be such jerks. To be so inconsiderate as to actually block, you've done it, I've done it, a lot of us have done it, where we're trying to take our kids either to basketball games, or we're trying to take our kids to friends' houses for, birthday parties, or we're trying to get our parents somewhere. These jerks decided to block traffic and make a point by blocking traffic. Like, they should be arrested. Every one of them should be arrested.
Yeah, and who are you persuading by doing that exactly? They're not persuading anybody. It's a symbolic middle finger with flags and everything else. But yeah, God forbid an ambulance is trying to get through there. There was another one on the Mario Cuomo Bridge in New York. State troopers were able to move them along pretty quickly, Mika. But we saw these scenes playing out across the country, first in Texas on Friday and the New York area yesterday.
Traffic is bad enough in New York and New Jersey and Connecticut, and these jackals decide they're going to make traffic worse. They're going to make people's lives more miserable.
No,
what are they proving? And by the way, yes, I say the same thing about leftists who have done this
but that's not what's
for
happening
years.
here.
But look what Donald Trump has made you. He has made you what you have hated your entire life. He has made you what you have criticized your entire life. You have become despicable in stopping parents from taking their kids where they need to go, stopping people from taking their parents maybe to the hospital. Maybe there was an emergency because you were trying to make a point. And this thing on Texas, I want you to see this car getting shoved out of the way. Is this, Republicans, is this what you want? Because your president is praising this dangerous behavior. Look at this. Look at that. Look at that. Is that what you want politics to look like? Because if not, you need to get out and stop being the weakling that you are and criticize Donald Trump, because this is what he wants the future of American politics to look like. And you know, obviously, I expect you to say nothing, because far worse than this is the fact that you have a president that's going around demanding that his opponent be arrested by the Attorney General because he's losing in the polls. You have a president who is saying to the Supreme Court, hey, fix this for me. I'm going to lose. I appointed you. Rig this election process for me because I know I'm going to lose. So I appointed you, Amy Coney Barrett. I expect you to rig this election for me. That's not me talking.
Yeah.
That's not me talking, Justice Barrett. That's the President of the United States who said he was going to appoint you so you'd rig the election for him. And he said this past weekend that he was thanking you in advance for rigging the election for him. Not my words, his words. And again, for Republicans, is this really how you want American politics to look?
Joining us now, State Attorney for Palm Beach County, Dave Ehrenberg. Also with us, Professor at Duke University Law School and an MSNBC legal analyst, Guy Charles. Good to have you all on board. We can start there. I mean, Dave Ehrenberg, just that traffic incident. It seems Dade County's 11 p.m. curfew. And while the president spent time in that Florida rally criticizing coronavirus restrictions, the crowd began chanting, "Fire Fauci." And here's how the president responded.
Don't tell anybody, but let me wait till a little bit after the election. I appreciate the advice. I appreciate that. No, he's been wrong on a lot. He's a nice man, though. He's been wrong on a lot.
He's been wrong a lot? He's the guy that was telling you it was coming back in the fall. No, it's not. He's the guy that told you hydroxychloroquine was not the miracle cure. You go, yes, it is. It's the miracle cure. Of course, when you needed a miracle cure, you sure as hell stayed as far away from it as possible.
Doctors now?
He's the guy, and the FDA is the guy who, you know, the FDA are the group of your people who had to warn Americans not to put bleach inside their bodies. They had to actually go out. This guy has been cleaning up your mess from day one, and you're saying he's been wrong? You know what's so funny is, when you were talking to Woodward, funny in a sort of, you killed 200,000 people way. But what's so ironic is that you were actually telling Bob Woodward in February, on tape, what actually the doctor that you're now talking about getting rid of has been saying publicly. The difference between you and him is, he's been saying it publicly, you've been saying it privately, and then you've been lying to the American public and letting them die. Just letting them die, despite the fact you knew better.
Yeah, so, and look.
So you're going to fire him for saying
this?
What you actually were telling Bob Woodward in February?
This president
That's interesting.
Is going against all health guidelines and holding these rallies across the country. And now the public health departments are tracking the uptick in coronavirus cases due to his rallies and deaths
you know,
due to his rallies.
You know who else is tracking it?
It's like a kind of a murder trip across the country.
Do you know who else is tracking it?
Who?
Voters.
Yeah.
You know, our doctors get more money if somebody dies from COVID. You know that, right? Don't tell anybody, but let me wait till a little bit after the election.
I'm joined now by Michael Steele, former RNC chairman and senior advisor to the Lincoln Project, James Carville, Democratic strategist and co-host of the Politics War Room podcast, and Maria Teresa Kumar, president and CEO of Voto Latino. Michael, I can't think of a worse closing argument than fire Fauci, who's the only person anywhere near the administration that people trust on COVID. But just give me your assessment of the closing round of the Trump argument.
So, Joy, I'm not surprised by the closing argument, because when you've not made a case to the American people for your reelection, what else do you say? when you've not talked about the economy in any shape or form, either how good it was before, what you've tried to do to recover it from COVID-19, or what you will do in the future, since that's your mainstay as the businessman. What else do you have to say? There is nothing left to say except goad the crowd into, chants of fire Fauci, goad the crowd into getting in their cars and creating these hazardous caravans across the country. So there is no closing argument here. The American people, by the tune of 93 million, have spoken. I agree with my buddy James Carville. Tomorrow, could be a pretty damn good day. Yeah. Because the American people have had enough, and they're just a teeny bit tired of crazy. And they're tired enough to move beyond what we're doing right now.
Jim Carville, you coined the term, it's the economy stupid. It feels like it's COVID stupid. People are dying, and that seems to be the thing people want to vote about. And Trump is mocking it. Well, assess that if you'd like, and also assess the closing argument by Joe Biden, how you think he is closing his campaign.
Well, the simple amount of truth is Trump is an idiot. He's at 43% approval. Dr. Fauci's at a 70% approval. So the guy at 43 attacks the guy at 70. And we're supposed to think that he's some kind of a political genius. He's an idiot. And it's just plain and simple. I used the word advisedly. I mean, at least let me see, politically he is. I don't know what his IQ is, anything like that, but politically he has no IQ. I mean, today I did the Andrew Mitchell show, and Trump was talking about the polls, and he wanted to fire some post at Fox News, and Vice President Biden was talking about the pandemic that we have. I mean, what do you think people are really concerned about right now? Is, getting sick, or some post at Fox News? I mean, it's so bizarre and idiotic. It really defies commentary. Usually you try to think of something clever to say. It's just, the man is he's just a blooming idiot. I mean, he really is. It utterly makes no sense out of it. There's no strategy. There's no nothing here. It's just sheer stupidity. It really is.
And Maria Teresa, and yet, there are some sort of weird blips in the data. And one of them is that Trump seems to be doing surprisingly slightly better, not a lot better, but slightly better with both Latino voters and some black male voters. I think that's a bit overrated. But on Latino voters, he isn't cratering, which I think surprises a lot of people.
So I actually think that what his strategy is trying to basically take back the election by a red mirage. So he's encouraging people to not vote until tomorrow so that there could be this swell of Republicans. And that will include some male Latino voters, and that includes some male African-American voters. And I think a lot has to do with how long you've been in this country. Interestingly enough, though, Joy, we at Voto Latino, we have targeted 3.7 million low propensity voters, people who sat it out in the last election, and they're showing up. And when you look at who's actually out voting and outperforming in Florida and in Texas, in North Carolina and Arizona, it's the young voter. And that young voter is not aligned with Donald Trump. And I think that when the president says that we need to round the corner, the only way, and let's level it with everyone, the only way we round the corner is to ensure that he does not have a second term in office. That's how we round the corner. The fact that we have 93,000 people dead, we have over 230,000 people dead, 9.7 million of us who have had the coronavirus. This is outrageous. And all he knows is to divide us. All he knows is how to create scare tactics. And unless we are very clear on what the stakes are, the people that are voting right now, the 93 million strong that Michael Steele was referring to, they're individuals that are exposing and going and voting despite the pandemic because they're sick and tired of putting their own lives on the line. And the stakes could not be higher.
We're going to show some of the Real Clear Politics averages and just throw those numbers up so that people can see them. But I want each of you to just go through one at a time and tell us what state you think will be the most interesting tomorrow night, and who do you think will control the Senate after this election? Michael Steele, I'll start with you.
Georgia, Democrats.
Okay. James Carville.
Texas, Democrat.
And okay, Texas meaning you think Biden will win Texas?
You're the most interesting state.
Most interesting. Okay, most interesting.
I think he's going to win Georgia. It's pretty good. I think Georgia. I would count Georgia as almost leans blue.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I think Texas. The vote total. And by the way, the young Latino vote in Texas is going to surprise people.
Okay.
First time Latino voters in Texas is going to surprise people.
Okay.
I think so. Right. I'm going to split the baby between both of us, both the folks, James and Michael. One of the two of the states that's going to turn blue is either going to be Georgia or Texas. For the progressive movement, you want it to be Texas only because we're talking about the redistricting that will take place in that state house and the ushering of the progressive movement forward. But James is right. The amount of young Latinos that have already outpaced individuals and the amount of Asian Americans in Texas that have outpaced the performance is huge. So I actually think that we're going to see a Democratic Senate, and the two states to watch that I find incredibly interesting is Georgia and Texas. Who will go first? I'm betting on Texas.
Very quickly, Michael Steele, is Texas the new California? Should Republicans be worried about losing it?
I've been saying for 20 years, Joy, in my work in the party, that Texas has always been our bright blue wall staring us right in the face that we just ignored.
Yeah.
Texas, I thought would fall in 24. It could potentially fall tomorrow to some great degree.
What? Okay, we are almost at the finish line, America. Deep breaths. Election day is tomorrow, and polls will begin closing exactly 24 hours from this very second. It is an election unlike anything that we've ever seen before. From the historic, earth-shattering early voting, numbers that are setting records all over the country, to the insidious acts of voter suppression and frankly outright thuggery that we're seeing that we're seeing from Trump supporters on highways and roadways in red and blue and purple states everywhere. And at the heart of this election, a pandemic that has ravaged this country, something both nominees address today as their campaigns come to a close.
You can't go to church. You can't take your family to dinner, but you can let people riot down the middle of your beautiful shopping streets, knocking the hell out of people, burning down your stores like in Minneapolis, burning the hell out of the place until we sent in the National Guard.
We choose hope over fear. We choose unity over division. We choose science over fiction. And yes, we choose truth over lies.
Okay, now we have to read out, that Many of you are feeling a lot right now. Excitement, trepidation, and yes, buckets of anxiety. But trust me when I tell you, family, because this is true. In real life, the only two things that matter right now are keeping yourself safe from COVID-19 and voting. That's it. If you've already voted, high fives. And now please try to get others to vote. Get creative with your civic duty. Pass out cookies or walk grandma to the polls, because tomorrow is it. Time to sprint through the tape. Now, what you shouldn't do is give one more second of your time and mental energy to the distractions that the Trump gangs are hurling at you. Those MAGA caravans, the clashes and blockings of roadways, all the highway stunts, the threatening display of guns and rifles, fear tactics that frankly aren't working. And we know they're not working because almost 97 million people have already voted, and more will vote tomorrow. Now, we're going to keep you informed on the numbers, the data, and the science. We're going to have Steve Schmidt and Eric Holder weighing in on this pivotal moment in American history. And we are going to spend our time telling you what's true. But first, the latest from key must-win battlegrounds, starting with the state that
stops right here and stops right now. America will start winning again, winning like never before. No school, no graduations, no weddings, no Thanksgiving, no Easter, no Christmas, no 4th of July, and no future for America's youth. Other than that, it's fine.
He's really got little hands. When he does this, you realize they're really tiny. Are you tired of winning yet? Huh? Donald Trump's closing argument after 4 years, scaremongering about a Biden lockdown, which is actually just one massive self-own, because all of that is already happening because of him and his surrender on the coronavirus. But he told his superfans today he's making America great again, and fighting for them. Not so much for those superfans. He left stranded at 3 rallies in 3 different states, Nebraska, Georgia, and Pennsylvania, in just the last week. Meanwhile, Joe Biden is running a new digital ad in battleground states with a very different message.
We need to revive the spirit of being able to work with one another. And it starts with how we treat one another, how we talk to one another, how we respect one another.
I'm joined now by Steve Schmidt, former Republican strategist and co-founder of the Lincoln Project. All right, Steve, you are a veteran of lots of campaigns, at least one of which I've been on the other side from you. So I trust when you say that you know when your side is going to win and when your side is going to lose. Give me where you are at, as you look at this race soberly, if you had to zoom out from the outside looking in. How strong is Biden in those Rust Belt states where he needs to win, in Florida and in those Sun Belt states? And, where do you see it going?
Look, I think that Joe Biden will be elected president of the United States. And I think, Joy, we'll know tomorrow that Biden has been elected. It may be late into the night, but before the sun comes up on Wednesday morning would be my prediction. I think that Biden is going to win Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. I think he's going to win 1 out of Georgia, Texas, Arizona. He may win all 3. When you look at the size of the early vote and you look at the dimensions of the vice president's lead, it's the biggest, it's the broadest of the modern era. It's bigger than the Obama lead against McCain. And I knew for sure that McCain was going down the next day. Look, the reality here is that when you look at all the evidence, when you look at all the body language, you look at Donald Trump, you look at the things that are coming out of his mouth, it reeks of a losing campaign.
Well, I mean, he's, you've got the New York Times, writing that he's ruminating sort of about maybe facing, prosecutorial scrutiny. Like, that doesn't sound like a winner, but you're right. I mean, you've got stuff like, today I asked my producers to pull up a thing that, to produce a little element for this. You've got Friendly's closing. You've got these 2 big mall companies closing. You've got just this sort of feeling of decay, and meanwhile, he's going around doing all this happy talk on the virus. I've never seen anything like it. He's sort of pretending that the decay isn't happening, but then the Wall Street Journal comes out and says, oh, by the way, all these stores are closing. I don't understand how he's even at 40.
Well, look, I think at the end of the day, Joy, we have a sociological problem in the country that we have 30% of the country that's fully involved in a cult of personality. We have a majority of the Republican Party believes in the basic tenets of QAnon theory. We have a conspiracy theory in this problem in this country. We have a radicalization problem. You know, this is an extreme movement. You know, the Stanford University study estimates 30,000 people have been infected by Trump's campaign events. Nearly 700 are killed. When we look at those events, we shake our heads, but I think it's important to remember to keep some perspective. You know, it is an infinitesimally small slice of the American population that you're seeing there cheering this insanity and delusional pablum and being as reckless as they are.
Yeah.
It's a very, very small slice of the country. And so when you step back and you look at the totality of everything, I'm calm tonight. I think it's going to be a big victory. And I'll also say this, I'm with James Carville on this. You know, at the end, I know there's a lot of nervousness because, you know, so many people understand what the stakes of the election are. I think it's the most important election since the election of 1864 for the country. But I believe in the country. I believe in America. And that point of view instructs me about what I think is going to happen. Yeah. And I believe what's going to happen is the American people are going to repudiate and thus humiliate the worst president this country's ever had in our history. And I say that with no hyperbole. He is the deadliest president through incompetence and malfeasance the country is likely to ever have, a failure at a titanic level.
You know, the way that you can tell that a campaign is sort of running kind of buoyantly, right, is that there's a joyfulness to it. When you see Kamala Harris out there, you know, when you see Barack Obama out there shooting, you know, baskets, and there is a sort of an upbeat nature to it. On the other side, you've got these caravans. They were even in my neighborhood. Where I live, it's very blue, and it's a blue area. They're driving these caravans through. They're intimidating people. They're trying to run people off the road. You know, people are putting up sort of signs showing their flags and, like, you know, gangs of ISIS cars going down the street in Syria and comparing it. They look like warlords. That is another thing I've never seen other than the Brooks Brothers riot. But even that wasn't this. What is this?
This is a marker of a fascistic enterprise and authoritarianish movement that has taken root in American soil, like a noxious weed and an invasive species. It is the same with the militia groups that you see storming state capitals and the presence of long rifles now as mainstays at political rallies. We are in an era of extremism. I make a direct linkage, for example, between the kid who sat in the front row of the Trump rally and then the day after the McCloskeys were on television for the only possible reason being that they pointed weapons at black people who were peacefully protesting. And then a kid drove from Illinois to Wisconsin, shot 3 people with his AR-15, driven by his mom, killed 2 of them, right? There's a direct line on all of this. And the genie is out of the bottle, as they say on this. So I saw this in Utah over the weekend. It's all over the country. It is menacing. The Trump rallies have teamed with menace. The Trump rallies have teamed with menace and violence on the fringes and at their core for 4 years. Someone smarter than me has to explain to me the difference between the armed militia people and Hitler's SA circa 1928, 1929. There is armed, politicized movement in this country that's faithful to Donald Trump. And we know that because they've been quite explicit about it.
And you know,
good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. With 5 days left until the end of voting, the dynamic of this race at its most essential core level has come into sharp focus. It is a battle between a pro-democracy majority and an anti-democracy minority. This is a fight for majority rule in this country to wrest control from the minority of Trumpists, a minority that has governed with disastrous and corrupt consequences. And that principle at the heart of this race is on display every day in the actions of the 2 campaigns and the 2 parties and the 2 coalitions. Everywhere you look, the Democratic Party's solution to the problem of Trump and the ongoing crisis in this country and the crisis of American democracy is to have everyone go vote. Make it as easy as possible to vote. Expand voting, as, for instance, Democratic officials have done in Harris County, Texas. Expand the time when people can vote. Work through the courts and through policy to be able to start counting votes before Election Day. And then count votes that might arrive late. For all this is that the more people who participate in American democracy, the better for the country and the better for the majority of people who want to see an end to the Trump administration. On the other side, Donald Trump and Republicans are doing the exact opposite. And while it's immoral and fundamentally anti-democratic in its approach, it is not an irrational strategy for them. They know they are not going to win a majority of the vote. Last time, Donald Trump won with nearly 3 million fewer votes than Hillary Clinton. He has a ceiling of support that Politico called his 50% problem. Donald Trump's approval rating has never hit 50%. He remains under 50% in national polling averages. And it is dawning on mainstream observers of this race that stopping people from voting and stopping votes from being counted is the Trump campaign's only viable option for victory. As Politico puts it, never before in modern presidential politics has a candidate been so reliant on wide-scale efforts to suppress the vote as Trump. A lot of these voter suppression efforts, as we've been reporting, are coming through the courts. The president and his campaign and Republican agents across the country are flooding the courts with lawsuits to try and stop votes from being counted and from people casting votes. This is an incomplete list of lawsuits, very incomplete. There's hundreds. We had to shrink the font just to get all this on one page to give you just a taste of what's going on. So earlier this week, the Supreme Court sided with Republicans, ruling that Wisconsin cannot count mail-in ballots received after Election Day, even if they were mailed before Election Day. Last week, the Supreme Court agreed with Republicans, blocking an order of voters, particularly old and disabled voters, to cast their ballots curbside. Took that away. Court agreed with South Carolina Republicans early this month that mail-in ballots in the state must have a witness. It's obviously harder to do that. Pennsylvania Republicans tried and so far have failed to get the Supreme Court to reverse a state court ruling that will allow ballots that arrive after Election Day to be counted. Republicans, the Trump campaign, tried the same thing in the state of North Carolina to stop ballots from arriving after Election Day to be counted, with the same result. They got rejected. The Trump campaign had previously sued to limit the use of drop boxes in Pennsylvania. In Nevada, they've filed 3 different lawsuits to limit the state's expanded mail-in vote system. In Texas, the top court in that state upheld the Republican governor's policy, allowing only 1 drop-off box per county. That's 1 drop-off box for the 4 million people in Harris County. Texas Republicans also, by the way, are suing to void thousands of ballots that were cast by voters in their cars. Republicans in Michigan sued to block a ruling allowing voters to choose anyone to deliver their absentee ballots and requiring absentee ballots that arrive late to be counted. The Trump campaign and Republicans have won a series of victories in Iowa, limiting absentee voting, making it harder for counties to process absentee ballot applications. That is just a small sample of all the litigation that's been going on. Just minutes ago, Minnesota Republicans won a case in the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals, it's a federal appellate court, that orders the segregation of late arriving absentee ballots in the state, the ones that come after Election Day but were mailed beforehand, with the suggestion that votes that arrive after 8 p.m. on Election Day be excluded from an official count. As conservative never-Trumper David French puts it, it is deeply disturbing that virtually everywhere the concerted litigation strategy of the GOP is to make sure that fewer votes count. The strategy goes far, far beyond any legitimate concern about fraud. The Trump and Republican strategy here has become completely untethered from any even invented claim, really, about fraud. I mean, they've voter suppressed in the past, the voter ID, where they said they were worried about fraud, and the president talks about fraud all the time. But in a lot of these lawsuits, they aren't even pretending that's what it's about anymore. Why would there be more fraud in a ballot that's mailed the day before an election or the one that's mailed 2 weeks before? The thin excuses for voter suppression efforts that we used to see are just gone. They just want fewer votes to be counted because they can't win any other way. And they think they have the courts on their side. And on top of that, maybe even more dangerously, Republican forces in battleground states are basically doing everything in their power to delay the counting of mail-in votes, which are, of course, expected to be heavily pro-Biden. In Cumberland County, Pennsylvania, where Donald Trump won by over 17 points in 2016, the county election board announced yesterday it will not even start counting mail-in and absentee ballots until the day after the election. We are living through, as you may know, a once-in-a-century pandemic, which looks to be spiraling out of control with 5 days to go until the election day. The incumbent president is down an average of about 9 points in the polls. Unemployment is still nearly 8%. The fundamentals of this race are a disaster for the president and his party, and they know exactly what they're doing. Their last hope is to essentially subvert democracy itself, because a free and fair election in which everyone participates would result in a whooping.
Debate in one of the campaigns for Senate in Georgia on Sunday night, and now that's not going to happen because of this.
It's not just that you're a crook, Senator. It's that you're attacking the health of the people that you represent.
That's Jon Ossoff in the last debate that he had against Republican Senator David Perdue, who has now decided to drop out of the debate scheduled for Sunday night because David Perdue seems to have decided that he cannot survive another minute on the debate stage with Jon Ossoff, and he may be right about that. Jon Ossoff has a tiny lead in the polls in Georgia, which is amazing for a Democrat, and Jon Ossoff will continue to press his case against David Perdue right here on this program at the end of this hour. Jon Ossoff, candidate for Senate in Georgia, will get tonight's last word. And tonight's first word goes to Joe Biden on the day when the 4 years of waiting has come down to 4 days of waiting.
Only 4 days left. Millions of Americans are already voting. Millions more are going to vote by late Tuesday night. And I believe when you use your power, the power of a vote, we're going to change the course of the country and, quite frankly, the world. Right here and I with all of you in the final days. Please keep your sense of empowerment. Keep your sense of optimism of what we can do together, because you know we can do anything.
Keep your sense of optimism. That was Joe Biden campaigning in Iowa today, where Donald Trump won by 10 points 4 years ago, and where one poll shows Joe Biden ahead by 3. So there's plenty to be optimistic about if you want Joe Biden to be the next president of the United States and Kamala Harris to be the next vice president of the United States. Joe Biden is actually giving you a piece of personal life advice for this weekend and these 4 days when he says, keep your sense of optimism, because that's how the professionals do it. That's how they get through it. I've been asking some successful presidential campaign managers on this program how they deal with the emotions and the anxieties of the final week, and they've given the kind of answer you would get from an airline pilot about landing a plane in a bad storm. They talk about concentrating on the data and doing their jobs. But I know how the candidates get through it. I've seen enough of that. When I was working in the United States Senate and I watched new candidates for Senate working their way to the finish line of a campaign, or veteran incumbent senators running for re-election, I saw how they handled the final days of the campaign, the way Joe Biden's doing it now. They choose optimism. Candidates running in a campaign where they have a good chance of winning and an equally good chance of losing simply choose optimism, because it is a choice. You can spend this weekend and the next few days racked with anxiety and fear and maybe even pessimism, or you can choose optimism. And if your optimism turns out to be wrong, you have plenty of time for fear and anxiety starting on Wednesday. But why ruin this weekend? Do what Joe Biden's doing. Choose optimism. Do what I learned to do in political campaigns. Choose optimism. Work hard. If you're one of the thousands and thousands of people who are working for a candidate, calling people, texting people, trying to get people to vote, and do it with optimism and pride that you're doing everything you possibly can to try to move this country closer to its ideals. And you have a lot to be optimistic about, starting with the miracle in the state of Texas. Today, early voting in Texas surpassed the total voter turnout in the last presidential election in Texas. Today is the last day of early voting in Texas. And so the next surge will come on Election Day, and Texas could go either way. Nonpartisan professional political analysts in Texas are saying Texas is in play for the Democrats. A Democratic candidate for president has not won Texas in 44 years. Democratic candidates for president and vice president don't usually bother to go to Texas. But that's where Kamala Harris was today, campaigning in Texas, trying to win Texas, because Kamala Harris is choosing optimism and working hard to win. That's what the best athletes do. They choose optimism and then they work hard to win. A new Fox national poll of likely voters shows Joe Biden ahead of Donald Trump by 8 points, 52 to 44. That is outside the 2.5% margin of error. So that's a real lead. Think about that. Think about how much Rupert Murdoch, the billionaire owner of Fox, hates paying for a poll that says Joe Biden has an 8-point lead over his friend Donald Trump. Joe Biden's polling leads are significantly higher than Hillary Clinton's polling leads were going into the final weekend of the presidential campaign 4 years ago. The more people named Donald Trump who speak on any given campaign day, the more damage is done to the Trump campaign. Donald Trump Jr. went on Rupert Murdoch's propaganda network to say, these are his words, "I kept hearing about new infections, but I was like, why aren't they talking about deaths? Oh, because the number is almost nothing. Because we've gotten control of this thing." That's what Donald Trump Jr. said. The deaths are almost nothing. What he means is no Trump family members have died yet from COVID-19. Americans, 969 died today, on a day that set a record for the new number of infections in a single day. 982 died yesterday, and that is more than triple the number of people who were killed in those hijacked airplanes on 9/11. 246 Americans were killed that day in those airplanes. And every single day in this country now, a number more than triple the number who were killed in those planes on 9/11 are killed by the coronavirus in this country. And Donald Trump Jr. says that that number is nothing. 969 deaths today is nothing to a Trump. Today, the other person named Donald Trump, campaigning for re-election in Michigan, lied about the doctors who treat COVID patients. Donald Trump said, I mean, our doctors are very smart people. So what they do is say, I'm sorry, but everybody dies of COVID. That's what he said. Donald Trump attacked the profession that saved his life when he got COVID-19. He says doctors are lying about what this pandemic is doing to us. Joe Biden responded to that in Minnesota today.
Doctors and nurses go to work every day to save lives. They do their jobs. Donald Trump should stop attacking them and do his job. Folks, this is the same man who weeks ago when he was told we're losing 1,000 lives a day, you remember what he said? He said, it is what it is. That's thoughtful. Well, it is what it is because he is who he is. Donald Trump has waved the white flag and surrendered to this virus. But the American people don't give up. They don't cower. Neither will I.
Kamala Harris's optimism brought her to Texas today, where she offered this closing argument in what she is working very hard to write into the history books as the first Democratic presidential campaign victory in Texas in 44 years.
My final point is this. This moment will pass. It will pass. And years from now, our children and our grandchildren and others, they will look at us, each one of us. They're going to look in our eyes, and they will ask us, Where were you at that moment? And you see, we're going to be able to tell them so much more than just how we felt. Fort Worth, we will tell them what we did. We will tell them what we did. We will tell them on this particular Friday afternoon, on the last day of early voting in Texas, we were sitting in a field hanging out with Kamala. We will tell them we texted everybody, called everybody, emailed everybody we knew. That yes, we knew we were kind of getting on their nerves, but we also knew they'd get over it. That we reminded people of the path that we are on, that the shoulders upon which we stand, that we reminded people about what is at stake, and that we reminded people about their power. And in this moment where we are dealing with crises, we reminded our friends and our neighbors and our family that you are not alone. Don't let anyone make you feel small. That you are big, you are strong, you have power, and at election time that power will be through your vote, and you will tell them when they ask that you elected Joe Biden the President of the United States. Thank you, Fort Worth, and God bless Texas.
Biden, who was in Broward County, made his closing argument.
In these final days, keep that sense of empowerment with you, that sense of optimism, of what we can do, what we will overcome. I've never been more optimistic about America or the American people than I am today. And on November the 3rd, we're going to unite this country and show the world who we really are. I'm running as a proud Democrat, but I'll govern as an American president to unite and to heal. I'll work as hard for those who didn't support me as those who do. That's the job of the president, a duty of caring for everyone.
Biden broke out the Ray-Bans. Meanwhile, in Tampa, Trump rattled off a litany of lies and grievances that were completely disconnected from reality.
We locked down, we understood the disease, and now we're open for business, and that's what it is. It's rounding the turn. It's rounding the turn. Joe Biden's plan will delay the vaccine, postpone therapies, prolong the pandemic. The cure, remember, I said it right at the beginning, the cure cannot be worse than the problem itself. There will be no school, no graduations, no weddings, no Thanksgivings, no Christmases, no 4th of Julys. There will be nothing. We're going to win. If we don't win,
Now what? Trump held his rally right outside Raymond James Stadium, home to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, in 87-degree heat. In what seems to be a new trend at Trump rallies, 12 people were transported to the hospital. Joining me now is Alexi McCammon, a political reporter for Axios, Neera Tanden, president and CEO of the Center for American Progress, and David Jolly, former Republican congressman from Florida, who is no longer with the party. And we like to let people know that because I'm about to ask you about your former people, David. So Trump goes to the cold and leaves his people in the cold so they can freeze. Then he goes to Florida in the heat and he leaves his people and they get sick of the heat. This is like a trend. Like it's like a death wish to go to a Trump rally at this point.
Joy, it's a perfect picture of Donald Trump just 4 or 5 days before an election. It is all about him. He has used the party from the very beginning. He is using the voters now for his own grievance campaign. But, you know, I was having this conversation with your colleague, Nicole Wallace, about leaving voters out in the cold and today in the heat. It is a compelling story, but it's just a capstone on the fact that he is drawing these crowds out in the middle of a public health pandemic, and he is risking their own lives. Herman Cain being a perfect example of somebody who lost their life because they chose to attend one of these rallies. He is lying about the public health consequences of public events. Leadership matters. The The power of the bully pulpit is an awesome force in America, and there are thousands upon thousands of people that are trusting his word, and his word is a lie, and it's risking their health and risking their lives.
You know, to which Donald Trump would probably say, "Who is Herman Cain? I don't know him. Didn't know him at all." Alexi McCammon, welcome to the show. You have not been on yet. I have watched you on other shows, so I'm excited to have you join the family and join the show tonight. Let's talk about the Trump campaign's strategery. Throwing these polls out here, Biden is up in Florida around the margin of error, but he's still up, and that's always dangerous for Florida. Biden is up in Iowa by 1 point, but he's still up. Pennsylvania, he's up more comfortably, over 50%. Biden is up in Ohio. I mean, at this point, does the Trump campaign understand where they really are? And do they dare communicate that? If they really understand where they stand, do they dare communicate that to their candidate?
We hear the way in which President Trump talks about this when he's out on the campaign trail. Just the other day in Michigan, he was bragging about polls that showed him up by just 3 percentage points, polls that he was looking at, and then goes on to say that those polls are fake, they're not real, suggesting that their internal polling is showing better fortunes for President Trump's reelection efforts. But what we're hearing from sources close to the campaign is that their internal polling isn't showing things going wonderfully for the president, and it's certainly not showing him doing much better in these states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin in the way that he's talking about it publicly. So no, we don't think that those internals are showing him what he wants, but it kind of doesn't matter, and you know this as well as I do, what President Trump's reelection team tells him or advises him to do. They want him to go out there and talk about the economy and hit Joe Biden. Donald Trump is not doing either of those things. He's talking about anyone but Joe Biden, finding these political foils who aren't Joe Biden, who are increasingly women and women of color. And he's not really talking about the economy for long because he's too busy talking about these grievances and all these people and institutions who are against him. So even if his team were trying to talk to him about internals, we know that the president doesn't listen to those around him.
Yeah, and, you know, Neera, a lot of Democrats have such deep PTSD that they see these numbers and they're like, I don't believe it. I don't want to hear that. I feel bad sometimes putting the numbers up because they go, I don't believe any of that because what happened in 2016. But I mean, if you just look at the data, I mean, the data wasn't wrong in 2016. It was that there was still a lot of margin of error, and Trump basically got all of the people who were undecided. They pretty much flowed his way. A lot of them did. But now just digging a little bit deeper into these numbers, just a little bit. I'm sorry, audience. I'm going to dig a little bit deeper. I do love polls and numbers. Of the people who voted early by party, Democrats 40% make up 40% of those who have voted early. Republicans make up 28% of those who have voted early. And other people, independents, make up 33%. Now, what that could mean is that on election day, the Trump people are just going to flood to the polls, and that, you know, because Trump is driving them toward election day, and that's when he's going to close the margin. That absolutely is something that could happen. But one more little just note, just specifically on Florida. The two most elderly states in this country are Pennsylvania and Florida. That's where the average age is the most elderly, is the oldest. Most seniors, you know, they have the most senior citizens. In 2016, Donald Trump won seniors handily, 57-40 over Hillary Clinton. That could also be an older people, gender situation. It could be a lot of things. Now, Biden is leading among seniors, 53-46. So, you know, the data would have to be wildly wrong for Donald Trump to be in a better position from his internal numbers than he looks to be in the data.
Absolutely. And I'll say something in addition to that. It's even more precarious because Donald Trump has basically conditioned his voters to vote on Election Day. Now, in places like Florida, we are seeing Republicans turn out early. But throughout the country, Democrats, as you're pointing out, have already turned out, mostly by mail, and continue to turn out. And this weekend will be another important weekend. But he's asking his voters to vote in person on Election Day as the virus rages out of control in much of the country, in particular, the Midwest. So he is asking people to come out, vote in person, as they are facing a 40% rate or a 25% positivity rate in a Wisconsin, in Iowa. You know, rates are increasing throughout the country. And so when you're asking people to do that, if he faces even a 1 or 2 or 3% of Republicans, anxious about coming out to vote, then he's going to face a real problem. And I think the fact that he's set up over months this idea people would only vote in person on Election Day really has him in an incredibly precarious position. Now, I'll say, I personally have a lot of PTSD. So if you know someone who hasn't voted, it's really important to get people to vote. We cannot rest on our laurels. The Senate is really, the presidential is one thing, but the Senate is also very much tipping on the balance. It's really important to get out the vote. But I do think that there's this, I do think this strategery of the Trump campaign may well significantly backfire. Yeah, I mean, I agree. Sprint to the finish. I always say sprint through the finish. You got to look 100 yards past that finish and sprint through it like a track star. But let's talk a little bit of Florida, David, which we love to do. The people in the villages, they vote by mail. They're not. It's not going to be like all. They are in golf carts. They're not like lining up. But okay, let's set the villages aside. Let's set that aside for a moment. Let's go to Duval County. You and I both know it very well. Right. The judge who was supposed to be in charge of the canvassing board had to quit because his whole house is festooned with Trump signs, and he donated a dozen times. I mean, at this point, Republicans are just like, I'm just going to violate the law. And you don't do that if you're winning, if you're confident. You didn't see people when Reagan was running for re-election being like, I got to violate some laws to get him back in. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
Your thoughts?
You don't cheat when you're winning. You cheat when you're losing. And Joy, this is an indication, I think, we're jumping ahead a week almost to what will inevitably be litigation around precincts or counties, whether it be in Florida or elsewhere. But I want to hit on what you were talking about with Neera on the senior vote, particularly in the state of Florida, perhaps Pennsylvania, Arizona, because this very well could be the national story Wednesday morning, that the senior vote broke hard towards Joe Biden. And the trend at this point, should it hold, is really a historic trend for Joe Biden bringing the senior vote over. And I'm intrigued by one thing, and whether or not there's a tie here. Joe Biden down the stretch is running a messaging campaign largely devoid of hard ideology. It's not to say that he's abandoned ideology. That's not the point I'm making whatsoever. But his closing message is about unity, about one America, about healing, about coming together, moving the nation forward. Converse that to the 2018 midterms and to Hillary Clinton's closing message, where it was healthcare, immigration, and taxes. And so you may mobilize your more partisan voters, your younger voters, your activists with that ideological message where you wouldn't motivate seniors. But Joe Biden's message might be pitch perfect for this demographic right now that is breaking his way, that could hand him the election in Florida, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and across the country.
And you know who? Trump won at the Electoral College in 2016 by crashing through the blue wall of Midwestern states. This time around, Biden is looking pretty strong in those states, but he may have an additional path to victory through the traditionally red Sun Belt, where the race is looking extremely close. And it's not just Trump who needs to be worried in these states, it's vulnerable Republican senators as well, like Arizona's Martha McSally, who Trump barely gave the time of day to at his rally yesterday.
Martha, come up just fast, quick. Fast, come on, quick. You got 1 minute. 1 minute, Martha's sake. They don't want to hear this, Martha. Come on, let's go. Quick. Come on, let's go.
They don't want to hear you. All these other guys got to talk. Just hurry up. Get it over with. Then there's Georgia Senator Kelly Loeffler, whose drive to show her undying loyalty to Trump is basically a comedy sketch.
You're still not disagreeing with President Trump's statements about personally sexually assaulting women.
I'm not familiar with that.
The Access Hollywood tape. He's referring to the Access.
Yeah, no, look, this president is fighting for America.
I'm joined now by the dynamic duo of Jason Johnson, professor of journalism and politics at Morgan State University, and Tiffany Cross, author of the great book Say It Louder, Black Voters, White Narratives, and Saving Our Democracy. Not only am I going to go ladies first, but I'm also going to go authors first. That pressure is on you, Jason. Write a book, and maybe you can go first next time.
Wow, just shots fired.
I'm just saying, shots fired. We know, y'all know how we do. Let's start with you, Tiffany. Pick one. You've got Martha McSally getting railroaded off stage so that Nigel Farage or someone can talk. And then you got Kelly Loeffler saying, I don't know about the Access Hollywood tape. Pick your adventure.
So, I mean, listen, let me just say, Joy, I will never be surprised at the way the 53% will handcuff themselves to a party who treats them like the dusty side chick and shuns them in public every chance they get. When you saw Martha McSally get totally dismissed, only paled in comparison to when Senator Loeffler lied. Let's not pretend that she was even feigning, doing a good job of pretending not to know about the Access Hollywood tape. Right. And the crazy thing is, you are riding so hard for someone who didn't even want you. Trump, remember, this is a special election. She was appointed to this seat by the great suppressor of votes, Governor Brian Kemp. And he usurped the Republican Party to do this as their failed appeal to win back white suburban women, which, relax, fellas, because they aren't running that far away from you, just only in small numbers. And so the fact that she's still just so thirsty for this man's love and affection, he wanted Doug Collins, his acolyte in Congress. So what has she done with this position? She sits on the committee that regulates her husband's business. She's involved in a financial scandal. She's a multi-millionaire who has treated the Senate like a cash cow. And for Martha McSally, for my fellow Handmaid's Tale fans, she's a Martha, so under his eye. I will never look to this demographic to be the savior of democracy. I think folks are breaking their backs all across this country, trying to defend against wannabe authoritarian. And we're seeing what that looks like when the ground swelling of a free people will stand against the powerful few who are looking at this as how they can benefit personally, not how they can serve their constituencies.
You know, I feel like Dusty Side Chick, that phrase has never made it onto the readouts. I feel like this is a historic moment. I want to give that a moment to breathe. I'm going to let that breathe for just a hot second. Okay, Jason Johnson, listen, and I believe your book is coming. Let me just start with that. I know it's coming. But to that point, Kelly Loeffler, what all she's gotten from Trump is maybe that sweet, sweet tip-off that the COVID was going to be bad so she could make those investments. But she is not polling well right now. The WNBA despises her. Raphael Warnock is up at 41. She's at 21. Doug Collins, he's lapping. Warnock is lapping both of them. And even in a hypothetical runoff, Warnock is ahead of Collins or Loeffler. What is the strategy, but just from a political science point of view, what is the strategy here for Loeffler?
There is none. There isn't. They keep thinking that they can, you know, Trump is their Mr. Big, right? Who keeps leaving them at the altar. That's what happens, right? And they want to attach themselves to him, but he's never going to come through. And I add not just Martha McSally, not just Kelly Loeffler, but also Joni Ernst. Right? He keeps leaving these women out in the cold. Let it go, because Donald Trump is not going to be there for you when it comes through. And the Republicans are not just running the risk of losing important seats that Mitch McConnell needs to continue to oppress the American people and pick the judges that they want, but they're also running the risk of changing the narrative about their ability to attract white suburban women. These are supposed to be the archetypes of the new Republican Party, and if all three of these women fall, Donald Trump is ground zero for why that happened. That's what the Republicans don't seem to realize. This gender gap is real, and it's going to completely affect them in the 2020 election.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the other side of the gender gap, even for the guys, like here's...
We've got a sleeping pill for you tonight, and that comes in the person of Charlie Cook. Charlie Cook is the most careful, most respected election analyst in Washington. Everyone in Washington always wants to know what Charlie's thinking. He's been doing this since 1984. And because I respect his judgment completely, I am going to sleep very well tonight, because Charlie is now saying that it's not a question of will Joe Biden win. Charlie Cook is saying it's just a question of will it be a narrow margin or will it be a landslide. Charlie Cook is saying Nancy Pelosi will add about 10 seats to her majority in the House of Representatives. And Charlie Cook is saying the Democrats will indeed win control of the United States Senate. It's just a question of how big that majority will be. And so, because I trust Charlie Cook's judgment completely, I'm going to sleep very well tonight. I recommend you make exactly the same choice. There is more that we will be getting to in this hour tonight. We have a lineup of experts, beginning, of course, with Steve Kornacki, who will begin for us at the big board tonight. We'll have John Heilman joining in tonight. We also have Yamiche Alcindor, who will be considering for us later in the hour the threshold of history where Kamala Harris stands tonight. And we'll also be joined by the Harris County Clerk, Chris Hollins. He won a lawsuit today in federal court in Texas in which the Republicans were trying to throw away over 127,000 ballots that were cast in Harris County in drive-through voting locations that Chris Hollins set up as a safety measure during this pandemic. Chris Hollins set up safe voting practices in the face of the pandemic, and that got him dragged into court by Republicans in Texas. Chris Hollins will join us later in this hour. And so here we are, finally. This is like the closing night for a long-running Broadway play or the final episode in a TV series, a series that began the day after Election Day 4 years ago when I began speaking to an audience who had watched the will of the majority overruled by a minority in this democracy that allows democracy to be perverted by the Electoral College. I didn't know how to do this show 4 years ago on that Wednesday night after Election Day. I just knew that I had to do the show. I didn't know how I was going to get through 4 years of doing it. I didn't know how we were going to get through 4 years of Donald Trump in the White House. I didn't know how this country was going to get through 4 years of Donald Trump in the White House. And we did it. We did it here, one show at a time, 1 week at a time. And I, for one, never looked up to see how far away we were from this night. And here we are. And we got here together. And we have now arrived here with hope. And I am here tonight with optimism about what tomorrow will bring and the days of vote counting that will follow tomorrow. There is no suspense, absolutely none at all. We all know, and everyone in the Trump campaign knows, that Joe Biden will get millions more votes than Donald Trump. Millions. Millions upon millions. Joe Biden will get millions more votes than Hillary Clinton got. The only suspense is what will happen in that one institution that does not exist in any other democracy on earth. The Electoral College. The Electoral College is slavery's revenge on the 21st century. And it has been used twice now to defy the will of America's voters, who have twice given more votes to a Democratic candidate for president, only to see the Republican candidate for president move into the White House. That is what Donald Trump is trying to do once again. Donald Trump has no hope of and is making no attempt to win more votes than Joe Biden, who is now running 10 points ahead of Donald Trump in the final NBC Wall Street Journal poll, 52-42, and 11 points ahead of Donald Trump in the final Quinnipiac national poll, 50-39. Joe Biden went to Ohio today trying to block a Trump Electoral College victory.
One more day. One more day. Tomorrow we have an opportunity to put an end to a presidency that's divided this nation. Tomorrow, we can put an end to a president that has failed to protect this nation. And tomorrow, we can put an end to a president that has fanned the flames of hate all across this country. Millions of Americans have already voted. Almost 100 million have voted so far. 100 million voted already. And more are going to vote today. And my message is simple. The power to change the country is in your hands. I don't care how much Donald Trump tries. There's nothing he's going to do to stop the people in this nation from voting.
Donald Trump continues to campaign for president like a vengeful juvenile delinquent.
Don't tell anybody, but let me wait till a little bit after the election. I appreciate the advice. I appreciate it. No, he's been wrong on a lot. He's a nice man, though. He's been wrong on a lot.
Someone will have to tell the president that he does not have the legal authority to fire Dr. Anthony Fauci. But Joe Biden responded to the Trump threat against Dr. Fauci.
I'm serious, man. This guy's a disgrace. The people of this nation have suffered. They've sacrificed for 9 months. None more than those doctors and nurses and those healthcare workers. And this president is questioning their character, their integrity, their commitment to their fellow Americans. As I said, it's a disgrace. And last night, Trump said he was going to fire Dr. Fauci. Isn't that wonderful? I got a better idea. Elect me and I'm going to hire Dr. Fauci. And we're going to fire Donald Trump. Donald Trump waved the white flag of surrender to this virus. We're going to beat this virus, and we're going to get it under control, I promise you. Look, the first step to beating the virus is beating Donald Trump.
And here's President Obama in Miami today.
Last night, this is last night on his COVID spreader tour. I mean, he's a super spreader. He just goes around because nothing's more important to him than crowds to make him feel good, as opposed to trying to keep the American people safe. Last night, he told his supporters, don't tell anybody, but I'm going to fire Dr. Fauci after the election. Don't boo. Vote. You know. And just in case you were worried he was taking COVID too seriously, now we find out his intention is to eliminate from his administration one of the world's leading experts in infectious disease. The one guy who's taken it seriously all along that he hasn't been paying attention to. He's been listening to the guy, apparently, who thinks injecting bleach might be a good idea, but not the actual expert on infectious disease. So they want to move out the scientists and the doctors who understand this disease and put in people or maintain folks who don't know what they're doing. Essentially, their closing argument when it comes to COVID is you ain't seen nothing yet.
And yes, we've got Steve tonight. We begin tonight at the big board with MSNBC's Steve Kornacki. Steve, what are you looking for? What should we be looking for?
Yeah, well, you mentioned it's all about the Electoral College. So let's take a look here at the battleground heading into tomorrow. The story is that the president's playing defense in the Electoral College. The battleground you see here, the battleground states shaded in here. These are all states that Donald Trump won in 2016. They are states where he either trails right now or the polling is very close, very competitive. His goal is to hang on to as many of these as he can to try to stay above 270 electoral votes. So we've talked about the importance of Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, this being the most direct route for Joe Biden to the presidency, simply because, look, if he wins, Biden does. Wisconsin, if he wins Michigan, if he wins Pennsylvania, puts him over 270. In the polling in these three states, these are the biggest polling deficits in the swing states, in the battleground states, that Donald Trump faces. That is particularly true in Wisconsin and Michigan. Of all the battleground states, Trump faces the biggest polling gaps in those two states. And that's why Pennsylvania, you hear so much as the must-win state for Trump, a must-win state for Trump. One, his campaign talks so much about if, and our poll today, by the way, in Pennsylvania has Trump down by 5. So this is a huge if right here. But if Trump is able to pick off Pennsylvania, win come from behind there, still fall short in these other two. Let's take a look at it from that perspective. And from that perspective, let's talk about the early hours of tomorrow night, because that's when some states we expect we're going to get a lot of vote, the lion's share of the vote, particularly Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, Ohio, and Texas. Each one of these, again, a Trump state in 2016, each one where the polls suggest he's got some degree of trouble. Florida's the state, 7 o'clock, all but the panhandle of Florida is going to start reporting. And if past his prologue, Florida's actually very quick at getting their results in. So within a few hours, we may have a very good sense of what's going on in Florida. Possible if Biden were to win this tomorrow night, just to show you, again, if he's getting Wisconsin and Michigan, that's how devastating a loss of Florida would be to Donald Trump. You know, and if not Florida, Georgia could do that. North Carolina could do that. Ohio could do that. Texas could do that. What I'm saying is, in those first few hours tomorrow night, Donald Trump is facing 5 must-win tests. He's got to sweep those 5 states to have a chance to get to the Midwest, pull out Pennsylvania, survive in the fight for 270. So we're going to get some really early readouts potentially on states that are absolute must-win for Donald Trump.
And Steve, Florida gets a head start on counting mail-in ballots, so they may be among the fastest reporters.
That's the key to all these states, why I single these out, because they can process, they can get these ballots done ahead of time. They've been counting ballots in Ohio for weeks now. You know, Florida, again, I think within about 30 minutes, 45 minutes of poll closing time, 7 o'clock, we're going to start getting a ton of votes from some of these counties.
Steve Kornacki, thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
You got it. Thanks.
We are joined now by David Plouffe. He served as campaign manager and White House senior advisor for President Barack Obama. He's host of the podcast Campaign HQ. He's also an MSNBC political analyst. David, the question for the pros when they get down to the final hours is, what do you know? I'm just giving you the wide open, what do you know? What do we need to know?
Well, Lawrence, I think what Steve showed, you mentioned Charlie Cook's analysis, which is he thinks Biden's going to win. Is it a narrow win? A narrow win would mean Trump holds on to Florida, North Carolina, Georgia, Texas, Arizona, and Biden then wins Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. But if Biden starts cracking in those southern states and in the Sun Belt, then you're heading to landslide territory. Secondly, we know a lot about the early vote. And there's no question that Donald Trump has to win Election Day decisively. Now, he did that in Florida in 2016, where Hillary Clinton did quite well in the early vote. So if you're the Biden campaign and Democrats, you can't let up the gas. They won't. You've got to have good enough Election Day turnout tomorrow. But Donald Trump enters Election Day in almost all the battleground states significantly behind. And what's curious to me, Lawrence, is he seems like he thinks he's going to lose the election. He's saying the only way I can win is to steal it and ask the Supreme Court and stop counting votes. And I can't imagine that's a huge incentive for the people. He needs a massive turnout tomorrow. And that's what I'm going to be, you really won't know what happens there until, as Steve Kornacki just said, we start seeing real votes being counted in North Carolina, in Georgia, and in Florida. And once we start see the results in those counties, we compare them to 2016. Is Biden doing better in suburban counties than Clinton did? Is he doing better in some of the exurban and rural counties? But then just as importantly is what's the turnout? And again, based on what you're seeing in the early vote, there's a lot of pressure on Donald Trump tomorrow to basically have another black swan event. Now, he had one in 16, but I think it requires a couple things. The polls to be off dramatically. And that happens sometimes. I certainly saw that in New Hampshire 08 when we were up by 8 against Hillary Clinton and she won. So it happens. And then I think a massive turnout differential. But my sense is the enthusiasm that we've seen in early vote, Democrats are going to have a strong election day tomorrow.
Now, Pennsylvania is going to be one of the slower reporting states, isn't it?
Well, it is. So first of all, if you look at the battleground states, it's probably going to have the lowest percentage of early vote. So you may have up to 60, 65% of the vote there being election day, number one. And number two, by state law, by the way, this includes a lot of Republican votes, a lot of military votes, overseas votes. They can't start counting till the day after the election. So that's exactly right. I will say there's a lot of people freaking out in the Democratic Party about Pennsylvania. Some polls yours showed, NBC's poll showed Biden up 5. Some people think that's too close. You see the poll average of 4. Listen, it's Pennsylvania. Okay, we won it by 5 in 2012. You're not going to win Pennsylvania by 8 or 10 points. So if I were Joe Biden, I'd feel very confident heading into tomorrow. But again, that is the one state of all of the battleground states that you're going to have the highest percentage of the vote coming in on election day. So the GOTV operation in Pennsylvania for the Biden campaign, has to be super strong.
David Plouffe, thank you very much for starting us off on this final night of campaign coverage. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Lawrence.
This is his last chance to explain why we should give him 4 more years. And what you hear him talking about is his inauguration crowd being smaller than mine. After 4 years, that's what he's still worrying about. Let it go. What is his obsession with crowd size? Does he have nothing better to worry about? Did no one come to his birthday party when he was a kid?
Joining us now, John Heilman, national affairs analyst for NBC News and MSNBC. He's executive editor of The Recount and co-host of Showtime's The Circus. And John, with lines like that, it makes me wonder if Mary Trump is feeding President Obama those lines. Did anyone come to his birthday party? John, I'm so jealous of you because I've been, studying these different hotel backgrounds in your shots as you've been moving around the country. I haven't been out on the campaign trail since March when I interviewed Joe Biden in Michigan. You've been all over the battleground states recently. What are you finding as one of the very few campaign reporters who's able to get out there in the battleground states?
Yeah, Lawrence, it's true. I mean, look, we decided to put the circus back on the air now 12 and a half weeks ago. So we're in our 13th week out there since early August, and we have covered a ton of ground. And then just to amplify that, I decided I would try to spend the last 72 hours before Election Day hitting a bunch of not battleground states, but kind of like second-tier battleground states. So in the last 3 days, I've been in Texas, Iowa, Minnesota, Montana, Ohio, and now I'm in Georgia, talking to you from Atlanta tonight. And I think there's a couple things that have really stood out. First of all, I mean, obviously, turnout, we've all noticed that turnout is kind of off the charts bonkers, but in certain places it's really bonkers. And Texas, I have a sense, having been in Texas and having seen the level of enthusiasm there and the level, the off the charts numbers there, and then talking to a lot of my usual sources in the people who are very wired into data and the campaigns and outside the campaigns, I think the biggest headline that I can bring you is that the possibility of Joe Biden winning Texas is real. And that doesn't mean he's going to win Texas. It's going to be very close. But this could be the year where Texas goes blue, and that would be a stunning thing. It would change the contours of our electoral map for generations to come, and it would certainly put a different light on the events of tomorrow night, because it would make it literally impossible for Donald Trump. Just that one victory would put the race away. I think the other thing is sitting here in Georgia, where there has been, the biggest story, I think, of this last week has been Georgia becoming a battleground state. The 6 core battleground states, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Florida, and Arizona, have been fixed all year. Those 6 states, both campaigns, spending money in them, advertising in them, doing ground operations in them, those 6 all year. In the last week, Georgia became a battleground state. Donald Trump came here, Joe Biden came here, and the race got very tight. And it's another situation where I think at this moment, again, on the basis of being here and talking to a lot of people with a lot of data, I think it's fair to say that it's more likely that Joe Biden wins Georgia than that he wins Florida, which I think is still very much a toss-up, as is Georgia. But I think right now you'd have to give Donald Trump the slight advantage in Florida. I think right now you give Joe Biden the slight advantage in Georgia, and that would also be an enormous thing. This has not been a competitive state at the presidential level since Bill Clinton in 1992. So this state going blue with those 2 Senate seats also at stake could be an incredible amount of political action here and a very big source of Democratic triumph if all of that comes in blue tomorrow night.
Well, you have just swerved us right into the Senate discussion, because that's where Georgia is so unique. Yeah. They've got the 2 Senate races. And if there's enough momentum in Georgia for the Democratic candidate for president to win, that would make winning Senate seats in Georgia easier. I mean, winning a Senate seat in Georgia is theoretically easier than a Democratic presidential candidate winning Georgia.
Yep. Well, and Lawrence, but Barack Obama, again, as you know very well, when you get down to these final days of the campaign, the most important thing to look at, even more than advertising, is where are the candidates spending time and where are their top surrogates spending time. So, that tells you where the race is being joined. And Barack Obama deciding to spend his last 2 events for Joe Biden in Atlanta this afternoon and in Miami this evening tells you a lot about the fact that the Democratic side thinks those races are within their grasp. And I was at David Perdue's last event tonight at an airplane hangar here in Atlanta. And I got to say, having seen some John Ossoff events in this cycle and then going to this David Perdue event where it's clear David Perdue very much feels like his back is against the wall, feels the race slipping from his fingers, this event was desultory, to say the least. And, maybe 200 people. And this is a Republican event, right, where they're not as worried about COVID. A couple hundred people in an airplane hangar at the very end of the campaign, like the concluding event for David Perdue. All the energy is with John Ossoff. And I will say, having spent some time also here in Atlanta with Killer Mike, who is one of the most important activists in this community, he's very keen on the notion that it's potential that Warnock also maybe not win this race outright on Tuesday night. I think that's still pretty unlikely, but that Warnock could come out of this race with a big head of steam and could end up being the top vote getter tomorrow night, and then put himself in a very good position in that runoff that's going to happen in January for that Kelly Loeffler seat.
Yeah, Raphael Warnock is in a race with over 20 candidates. One of them, a Democrat who's siphoning off about 5% of the vote, and so that's a struggle for him. John, the thing that struck me in the travel schedule the most, actually, was Joe Biden going to Ohio. I mean, everything else I kind of saw coming. I didn't see that one coming.
Yeah, well, you know what happened there, and it's been reported that I saw Senator Sherrod Brown today and his wife Connie Schultz. They both were really advocating for this with the campaign for weeks, saying, Ohio's closer than you think. Ohio's been the ultimate battleground state in American politics for most of my career. I've been at more events in Ohio over past cycles than any other state. In 2004, it decided the election. In 2016, the Republicans held their nominating convention. They're the one that picked Donald Trump. But the fact that he won by 8 points in 2016 meant that people didn't think it was a battleground state. You look at Sherrod Brown's victory 2 years later, and you looked at some of the data in the state, you had Sherrod Brown saying, look, you can pull this off. And then on top of that, the data wizards around Mike Bloomberg weighed in and came into also the Biden campaign and said, we see it too. It's not going to be easy. Trump still has an advantage, but with some money and some time, you might be able to get this done. And as Bloomberg has been reported, the Bloomberg people poured in millions of dollars into the state in the closing week or 10 days. I still think it's going to be tough for Joe Biden to win that state. But man, I think it's going to be a lot closer than anybody thought it was going to be a couple weeks ago. And if you look at the situation in Iowa, where almost certainly Trump is going to win, but the smartest people in Iowa say he's going to win by 2 or 3 points, go win that state by 9. That is probably a similar thing is going to happen in Ohio. The only question is whether he can actually eke it across the finish line. That's how close it's going to be there.
John Heilemann, thank you very much for joining us on our final night of campaign coverage and for joining us throughout the campaign. Really appreciate it.
We'll see you later, Lawrence.
Thank you. Texas has gone from being a solid Republican state to being a toss-up in the presidential election. Donald Trump and Joe Biden are now tied in Texas, and so Republicans are trying to win Texas by throwing away votes cast by Democrats. That is the only purpose of 2 lawsuits brought by Republicans in Texas. The Texas Supreme Court, which is filled with nothing but Republican judges, rejected the first case on Sunday. Then the Republicans filed essentially the same lawsuit in federal court, where it was considered today by federal Judge Andrew Hannon, who was appointed by Republican President George W. Bush. Judge Hannon also dismissed that Republican lawsuit today. Each case was filed against our next guest, Harris County Clerk Chris Hollins, who set up drive-through voting as a COVID-19 safety precaution. At least 127,000 early voting ballots were cast in the drive-through voting locations in Harris County, Texas, which includes part of Houston. It is the biggest county in the state of Texas, and it usually votes Democratic. Joining us now is Harris County, Texas Clerk Chris Hollins. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Was there any indication in these lawsuits that the Republicans will be back in court making the same claim after Election Day?
Well, if the past has shown us anything, it means that they're going to be relentless in doing their best to suppress votes here in Texas. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there are more lawsuits after this. The one that got rejected today was one of at least 10 filed by these same plaintiffs. They've lost every single one, fortunately, but they haven't shown any sign of giving up.
Do the judges involved indicate that the posture of the case changes after Election Day and might become more favorable to them to be able to disallow the counting of those votes?
Not at all. The judge today was exceedingly clear that the 127,000 votes that have already been casted here, and those are Republican votes and Democratic votes, just to be clear, but those are going to be counted. And we're thrilled about that. My job is to protect the right to vote for all Harris County voters. And we're so glad that the 1.4 million votes that have been cast already are safe. And we're looking forward to hundreds of thousands more coming in tomorrow.
Now, the votes coming in tomorrow, are they going to be held apart and separate from the other votes in case there is litigation about the way votes were cast?
Well, we always preserve all of our votes for any sort of audit or investigation. And so we'll preserve them in the same way that we always have. But again, the law is on our side here. We don't expect there to be any meritorious claim made against these votes. And we're going to make sure that every resident here in Harris County who's registered to vote has the opportunity to have their voice heard this November.
What is your legal authority to decide to have drive-through voting?
So I make a recommendation to our commissioners court, which is bipartisan, to determine the locations of voting. And those locations include our drive-through voting locations. And they were approved unanimously a couple of months ago.
And in tomorrow's voting, does the early voting indicate that then tomorrow's voting won't be such long lines because the early voting has taken so many people out of those lines?
Almost certainly. We expect somewhere between 200,000 and 400,000 votes to come in tomorrow, but we have over 800 voting locations across Harris County. And so I'm going to knock on wood, but we're expecting a smooth day tomorrow. We look forward to making sure that voters can cast their votes safely and conveniently and with the peace of mind that their votes are going to be counted.
Harris County Clerk Chris Hollins, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Lawrence.
On nights like this, everyone in Washington wants to know, what does Charlie think? Charlie Cook is Washington's most experienced election analyst who always has the sharpest focus on the balance of power in the House of Representatives and the Senate and the individual elections that can change those balances of power. Charlie Cook is a meticulously careful analyst whose judgments are never influenced by partisanship, just the facts that he finds in the data. On the presidential race, Charlie Cook is now saying with something close to certainty that Joe Biden will win the election, and the only question now is whether it will be a narrow win or a landslide. Charlie Cook says a landslide is more likely. He expects Democrats in the House of Representatives to pick up more seats to strengthen their majority by about 10 more seats. And on the United States Senate, which will be my focus of coverage tomorrow night, Charlie Cook says the Senate is increasingly less a case of whether Democrats will take a majority, but how large it will be. And the reason I'm going to have a perfectly good sleep tonight is that I have always trusted the judgment of Charlie Cook, and I recommend you do the same. Joining us now is Charlie Cook, editor and publisher of the Cook Political Report and columnist for the National Journal. He is an NBC News political analyst. And Charlie, I'm recommending to all viewers that they read your article in the National Journal for the full analysis that you're going to sketch out for us here. Take us straight to the Senate races tonight, Charlie, and how you see that unfolding.
Sure, Lawrence. Between you and what Pluff said, geez, I wish my parents were still around to hear this. This doesn't get any better than this. I think we're looking at, on the low side, 2 or 3 seat gain for Democrats. On the high side, 5, 6, maybe 7. You've got a lot. You've got 9 Republican seats that are just right on the knife's edge. Plus, -1 from Alabama. They'll be going the other direction. And one of the things that's interesting about these Senate races is the toss-ups at the end. Over the last 11 elections, close to 70% have broken one way or the other each year. That they've either 70% have gone Democrat, 70% go Republican. The highest was like 89%. The lowest was about 59%. But the close ones, it's like the last little of air just sort of knocks them. So these things can get really explosive, particularly when you're seeing as parliamentary of voting that we're having now, where people are they're just voting red or they're voting blue. And it's quite something.
So in terms of most likely flips from Republican to Democrat, you're looking at the most likely are, I believe, Colorado and Arizona in your view?
Yeah, and I would throw North Carolina in. I mean, this has got to be demoralizing for Republicans, is that when a Democrat is ahead by 5 to 7 points and has a sex scandal in a southern state, and it knocks maybe 2 points off. I mean, that tells me that things are parliamentary, that the names on the jersey are less important than what color's the jersey. And, you know, if for parties, sometimes you're the windshield, sometimes you're the bug. And this year, just like in 2006, it looks like Republicans are the bug. But yeah, that North Carolina seat, I think it's going to be, it's sort of in the Gardner and McSally territory. And so that leaves us with the next four, which would be, you know, Maine, Iowa, and both Georgias. Although I'm not sure I'd stop there because Montana is awfully close, and South Carolina maybe a point or two behind. So these things can. They're really stacking up, and you know, there's sort of, these things are not. I mean, that when you have a presidential camp that's 10 points ahead, and you're trying to like stay above water, you have to be like a Michael Phelps or a Johnny Weissmuller because the undertow is so great, and that's what these Republicans are facing in a lot of these states with big suburbs. This is a tough place. But so 3 probably gone, and then 4, 5 just teetering right there.
And the total in play is up around 9 or 10?
Yeah, I would say 9. Those, and then there's Alaska, Texas, and a Kansas open, and those I would not put in the same category, but they're not that far off. And this is looking. I tell you what, Lawrence, you remember 1980, 6:30 at night. Birch by Democratic incumbent from Indiana. He loses at 6:30, and Democrats then lost a Senate seat every half an hour for 6 hours. And this is what happens, and this is the rarest of all things, where it's a wave election in a presidential year, because usually they're midterms, and one that ends at a 0, so it's leading into redistricting. Wow. So we'll see soon.
All right, we will be watching. Charlie, thank you for that guidance. That's invaluable on the last night of our coverage of the presidential campaign. Really appreciate it. Thank you,
tomorrow
Charlie.
night.
Thank you. And when we come back, Senator Kamala Harris has made history before, and she's on the verge of making history again. Yamiche Alcindor will join us. And tonight's last word will go to Ray Charles. Tonight, Kamala Harris stands at the threshold of history. The polls indicate that when all the votes are counted, Kamala Harris will become the first woman vice president of the United States, the first Black woman vice president of the United States. She began her career in elected office at age 39 when she won her first campaign for San Francisco district attorney. As she moved up in California politics, she never lost an election. She won statewide office as California's Attorney General in 2010. She was elected to the United States Senate exactly 4 years ago on the same night that Donald Trump was elected president. There was immediate speculation that California's new charismatic senator would run for president, which she did. But like Joe Biden before her in 2008, a campaign for president led to the Democratic Party's nomination for vice president of the United States. Here is Kamala Harris in Pennsylvania today.
They know our power. They know when we vote, things change. They know when we vote, we win. So let's not let anyone take our power from us. We will not be sidelined. We will not be silenced. We know our power.
Joining us now, Yamiche Alcindor. She's the White House correspondent for PBS NewsHour and an MSNBC political analyst. And Yamiche, we're just going to throw up on the screen the list of firsts that Kamala Harris would represent as a vice president of the United States. She is already the first Black woman to run for vice president on a major party ticket, first Indian American to be a candidate for vice president on a major party ticket, first graduate of a historically Black college or university to run for president or VP. She's the first member of a Black sorority to run for, and by the way, Yamiche, that's your sorority, I believe, to run for president or VP.
It's my sorority.
And this is the one that I kind of guessed at, and when we fact-checked, it turned out to be true. First California Democrat on a major party presidential ticket. The Democrats have never gone farther west than Texas for their presidential ticket. Yamiche, this is a candidacy unlike any we've ever seen.
That's right. And no matter what happens tomorrow night, has solidified her place in history as the first Black woman on a major party ticket to be a vice presidential nominee. And I can tell you from the reporting that I've been doing all over this country, some virtually, but also on the ground in places like Florida and Wisconsin, people, especially African Americans, are so proud to see someone that looks like them on a major party ticket. African American women in particular are the backbone of the Democratic Party. And they've been saying for years that they want to see themselves represented in a major way, in a principal way. And that's what they got in Senator Harris. I should also note that when you look at a study in 2009 by Tufts University, among college graduates, African American women in particular had the highest voting rates of any race, of any ethnicity. So Black women are active, they're plugged into elections for a long time, and Senator Harris is representing them in some big ways. Another thing to note is I remember interviewing Senator Harris before she became the nominee, and she told me her mother always told her, be the first, but don't be the last. So she is someone who has told me that she's very much invested in making sure other women, other people of color, other Asian women, other people that have diversity, that they also see themselves reflected and also have the support to go to the places where she went.
Yamiche, clearly she knows she's a role model and she knows about all those little girls dressing up as Kamala Harris for Halloween, but she seems to wear it effortlessly. She rarely even comments on it. It seems to take for granted her position in a way that does not need to refer to this.
She doesn't need to refer to it. And I think what's heartening, especially for Black women, Democratic voters, she's someone who went to an HBCU, as you said. She's someone who really exudes the culture of African American women. She's someone who African American women relate to without having to overtly have her talk about her Blackness. She's someone who understands really what it takes in some ways to succeed as a person of color in this country. And that's why you see so many of those little girls dressing up, because they see themselves reflected in her. There are a lot of times where African Americans, when they're first in all sorts of positions, they might want to not talk about it all the time, but just her being there, her physical presence on this campaign trail is history making. And she has the real cultural swagger, is the way I'll put it, when you see the way that she refers to herself. But she also has been overt about the fact that she wants to talk about being a member of the Divine Nine, African American sororities and fraternities in this country that don't always get a lot of political attention. So I think the nation has also learned so much about sororities and about Black culture through her.
There was, I know there were some people who thought that at the beginning of the campaign, that first debate, when it got tense with her and Joe Biden, that would rule her out. But that didn't look like anything that was going to rule out her possibilities as VP.
No, she was someone who obviously knew what she wanted and knew that she had to go there and knew that he was someone who was a big opponent. So she didn't feel at all that she had to back away from that. And I think a lot of Black women were proud to see her do that.
Thank you very much, Yamiche. Really appreciate it.
I'll let you motherfuckers think y'all run everything. Motherfucker. You owe me some money, motherfucker. You motherfuckers talking about? Motherfucker, I eat everything. I eat the pussy, I eat the butt, I eat every motherfucking thing. Motherfucker, I'll chew his ass up, motherfucker. So smart, motherfucker. English, motherfucker. We're not gonna store the motherfucker. I'm on the motherfucker. I'm a mushroom cloud laying motherfucker. Ha ha ha. You're closed, motherfucker. Sewer rat may taste like pumpkin pie, but I never know because I wouldn't